What's up, everyone? It's Blue from Blue Bears Games, and this week I am bringing you a very special Blues Budget Brews. I'm going back into some Commander stuff. This week is a little special because I've got a customer. His name is Nathaniel, and he had requested 2 budget Commander decks, and one of them is very special because it was for his 9-year-old son, and he wanted to get him into Magic and Commander in general. And that gave me an opportunity. We talked about a lot of different things and how to do it, and I like to make decks for people who are just starting out. I've never made one for somebody that young, so we had to collaborate a little bit, and we finally came down to, obviously, monocolor, and what was the simplest deck I could do that could at least be fun. That brought me to Ayula Queen Among Bears because it's a simple yet effective commander, and it's a bear deck. So we are actually doing Budget Beginner Bear Force 1. So it's near and dear to my heart, obviously, because A, it's a bear deck, and if you haven't seen the name of my channel, you obviously know that bears are my thing. And then, of course, it's for his son, and I tried to get my own son into the game right around the same time, and he was just doing the video games. So I wanted to make something that would be fun, exciting, be a little, cool for them to play around with. All the bears are really nice. And then also something that would keep his attention, but not be so difficult to use that he wouldn't want to continue playing. So let's get into Bear Force 1. I'll show you all what I got. This is actually partially a educational video for his son, who is also, again, 9 years old. So I'm going to be a little wordy on some things and explain some things normally that I don't have to, just so that everything gets conveyed correctly. So let's talk about Ayula. Ayula, Queen Among Bears, is the typical bear. It's a 2 to cast 2/2. That's what a bear usually means in Magic terms. That's the term for them. It's usually a 2 to cast 2/2. Obviously, it's the legendary bear. Has 2 abilities, and they're all simplified enough, but they work for somebody who's just learning, and works very well if you want to, actually win a little bit. So let me get into that. All right, so her first ability is both abilities pertain to when a bear comes into play. Remember that term comes into play. It's not cast, so it's whenever a bear, doesn't matter how it got into play, comes into play on your side. They get 2 things. They get one or the other. So they get either 2 +1/+1 counters, or they fight target creature you don't control. Now, remember the term fight. I'm going to use that later because there are going to be other cards in here that fight. So fight just means that that creature that came into play takes its power and deals it to a creature an opponent controls, and then that creature that you targeted with that fight does its power back to the creature. So that's what fight means, and we'll go into that more. Hi, Ginger. That's my cat, everybody. All right, now I'm going to go over the lands for you and show you what I got for lands for a beginner deck and show you what I chose as part of this. So we're going to start off with Path of Ancestry. So normally in Path of Ancestry, I put in multicolor decks because it can add a color mana, whatever your commander's colors are. But it fit very well in this deck because it's a tribal deck, and this is a tribal land. So it adds a mana of any color that matches your commander's color identity. In this case, it's going to be green. And then when that mana is spent on it to cast a creature spell that shares the creature type with your commander, you scry 1. Scrying is pretty simple. When you scry 1, you look at the 1 card on the top of your library, and you can choose to either put it back on top or put it on the bottom of your library. That's all scry means. It's very effective, helps you get better draws. Opal Palace, another one that I normally would only put in a multicolor deck because it adds a color, of your commander's color identity, but it comes into play untapped, unlike Path of Ancestry. It can tap to add a colorless, that's what that symbol means, and then you can pay one of any color, tap it to add a mana of any color in your commander's color identity, and then if it's spent to cast your commander, it enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters equal to the number of times that you've cast your commander from the command zone. So if you cast it once, it comes into play. If you use this to cast it for the first time, it comes into play with 1, and so forth. 1 counter. And remember, the counter theme is going to be very heavy in this deck. Gingerbread Cabin, it's a forest. It taps to add a green. It comes into play untapped if you control 3 or more forests, and it gives you a food token. I kind of wanted to do a little play with food and bears. You get the theme. Fertile Thicket comes into play tapped. It's here to add the green, just like most of the other cards lands in here. It has the ability to look at the top 5 cards of your library when it comes into play, and then you can take you can reveal a basic land and put it on top of your library. It's to help if you need to get land in play. If you don't, you can then actually take all those cards and put them on the bottom of your library if you don't like what you found. Tranquil Thicket, this one comes into play tapped as well, but it's cycling. So later in the game, you might not need that many lands. This deck is actually very low mana cost, mana value curve, meaning that it doesn't have anything really high casting cost. There are some things, but by the time you hit turn 7, you might not need land anymore. You can just pay the 1 green, cycle it away to draw a card. It's good to help you, get through better draws. Every deck I make has at least some form of land destruction in it, only because there are lands that you just don't know what you're going to come across. This adds 1 colorless to your mana pool, and then you can pay 1, sacrifice it, or tap it and sack it. And then destroy a non-basic land, but you can only activate this ability if you have 4 or more lands. That includes itself, so it'll take you down to 3 if you only have 4. It's still just there for a emergency button in case somebody's got something really nasty on the board that's killing you. Rogue's Passage makes something unblockable. It's pretty much in there just because, why not? This is a tribal deck, and anytime you have a tribal deck, you want to make something unblockable. Maybe you want Ayula to get commander damage, what have you. It's just good to have in there. Temple of the False God, I don't normally add to a lot of decks. This one didn't really mind it because it's green. There's a lot of land ramp in there, so you're going to get to the 5 more lands. The hope is you draw this later in the game, not early. Okay. There's also another thing I'm going to show you near the end of the video in one of the other sections where this can actually end up becoming something way more helpful. Quicksand looks like an odd choice. It comes into play untapped. It adds a colorless mana to your mana pool. But you can then also tap it and sack it so that target attacking creature without flying gets -1/-2 until end of turn. Here's the trick with this one. It doesn't say attacking you. It just says attacking. So in a normal game of Commander, most people don't even pay attention to other people's boards unless it's something really, really, oppressive. This will probably get lost in the mix, and people will start attacking with something that has a 2 toughness or less, not even attack you. And if it's something that's oppressing you, you can kill it, and people won't even remember this is on the board. So that's what that inclusion was for. It's also good for combat tricks. If somebody attacks you, they think they have the upper hand, they forget you have the quicksand, and you make their creature smaller. So let me see what else we got here. Evolving Wilds. Evolving Wilds is more for deck thinning, is what I call it. It doesn't add mana to your mana pool, but it goes and gets a land and takes it out of your deck and puts it into play. Albeit tapped, but it's still a little bit of mana fixing. It's also, in this deck, it doesn't need mana fixing because all you need is green, but it's good deck thinning. And then the rest are forests, and if you want to know exactly how many forests, the total amount of lands in here is 35, I believe. I will have the deck list in the comment section, not the comment section, I'm sorry, in the description of this video so that you can see everything that's going on. We're going to move on to the ramp section. Remember, we're in green. This was also on a budget, so some things are a little more expensive, so I'm trying to fit the budget while also making a usable deck. So we're going to start off with something I don't normally use, which is Horizon Spellbomb. It's an artifact that costs 1, and you have to pay 2 and sacrifice it to get the effect. So you can search your library for a basic land card and put it in your hand. Now this is not ramp. Ramp puts it into play. This is mana fixing. We don't need a mana fix in mono green, but what we do need to do is have better draws later. So this gets a land out of the deck so you don't draw it later. The benefit to this one though is that when it goes to the graveyard, so when you sack it, or if somebody tries to destroy it, you can pay a green to draw a card. So this is in here for better draws later and to draw a card. Rampant Growth is the card that they actually name Ramp after. This is kind of what they modeled after, Rampant. So Ramp, it's 2 to cast. You can go search your library for a basic land card, any basic land card, but it has to have a basic land type. So that's Forest in this case. Put it into play tapped and then shuffle. Same thing with Untamed Wilds. It's the same thing, only comes into play untapped. That's why it costs 1 more mana. Beneath the Sands, same thing. It's 3 to cast, and you can go search for a basic land and put it into play. This one comes into play tapped, but it has the second ability of being able to cycle it away, which means you pay 2 and discard this card to draw a card. So more card draw if you don't need the land later. Map the Waste, same thing, 3 to cast, goes and searches your library for a land and puts it into play. This one bolsters, which means that it puts a +1/+1 counter on a creature that has the lowest toughness that you control, following the theme of +1/+1 counters for our deck here. Search for Tomorrow, again, 3 to cast, however, it does the same thing, it searches your library for a basic land and puts it into play. Doesn't come into play tapped, but it also has Suspend. So, instead of paying the 3, you can pay the 1 and suspend it, meaning that you exile the card, put it aside, put 2 counters on it, and then every upkeep you can remove a counter, and when the last one is removed, it casts it for free for you. So if you have it in your opening hand and you don't have anything else to play, you can actually suspend this, and it'll cast for free later, meaning you don't have to spend the 3 to do it, so you can do multiple things on the turn early. Natural Connection, this is an instant form of it, so you can do it on your opponent's turns. Pay 3 and go search for your library for a basic land, put it into play tapped. And the last ramp card is Harrow, 3 to cast as well. Also an instant, very important, you can do it on your opponent's turn. To cast this spell, you have to sacrifice a land in addition to paying the mana cost, but then you go search your library for 2 basic lands and put them into play, untapped, okay? So that's the ramp section. That's to help thin your deck out of lands, put land into play faster than you're supposed to, and then kind of start rolling from there. The meat and potatoes of this deck will be the bears. So a lot of these bears have abilities, some of them don't. So we're going to start off with the good old Beduvian bears, grizzly bears, Ironclaw bears, and a bear cub. They're all 2/2s for 2. That's the very definition of bears in this game. It all started with the good old grizzly bears. They were the original bear. They were 2 to cast for a 2/2. That's usually what the term for bears means. Now, a lot of the bears in here have abilities. It kind of screwed up what I was going to do. I was going to try to put in stuff in here that if the creatures don't have abilities, they get bonuses, but a lot of these had abilities, so let's go over them. Mother bear is a 2 to cast 2/2, just like a normal bear, but it has the ability to exile itself from the graveyard and create 2 2/2 bear tokens. Remember, the ability that Ayula has only happens when it comes into play, not when it's cast, so that also affects these. Spectral Bears was a 2 to cast 3/3, has a negative ability on it though, so if it was declared as an attacker and the defending player doesn't control a black card, it doesn't untap during your next untap step. However, if that is the case, it will untap the turn after that tap. Werebear, so it's ramp, so it's a 2 to cast 1/1. It taps to add a green, so it adds to your ramping ability, because creatures that tap to add mana for a low casting cost technically are ramp. This thing has a special ability called Threshold, where it gets +3/+3 if You have Threshold, which means that when you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, there are enough cards in here that will probably be going to the graveyard that should be effective, so it'll essentially be a 4/4. Guardian Gladewalker is the first of a couple of shapeshifters that I have in here. They are not technically bears per se, but they all have Changeling, and I have a couple of them in here, so that means that they count as every creature type, and that includes bear, so when they come into play, Ayula affects it, and everything else that affects bears does too. When it comes into play, you can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, any creature on the board. Yours, your opponent's, your commander, doesn't matter, itself, it doesn't matter. Alpine Grizzly, it's foil, and the reason why it's foil is because it was easier for me to go through my foil box than it was for me to go through my bulk box to find this one. It's a 30 cast 4/2 instead of a 2/2. The only reason why it's foil is because it was easier to find. Dragon Scarred Bear, it's 30 cast for a 3/2 instead of a 2/2. It has an ability called Formidable. It's not a very popular ability, but it works in this one. It lets you regenerate for 2 mana. Regenerate just means that if it would die from damage or a destroy effect, you can regenerate it, meaning that it'll stay on the board, it won't go to the graveyard. The only way you can activate this ability is if you control total power on the board of 8 or more. It itself provides 3 of that, so you only need 5 more. Remember that Ayula itself is a 2/2, so that puts you at 5 if you have her in play. And anything else that you've cast, maybe even this itself came into play with 2 +1/+1 counters, that gives you 5 instead of the 3 here. Ayula would be 2, and if you have anything else, that will give you the 8. Ovenwald Bear, 30 cast 2/2. This one has a cool ability. It has Morbid, which means that when it comes into play, if a creature had died this turn, you can put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Any creature. Remember, it could be put on your commander. It can be put on your opponent's creatures. You won't normally do that unless there's a reason for it. It can also be put on itself or anything else you have in play. Vivian's Grizzly is the quintessential best bear in the deck, at least from my standpoint as a blue player. It's 30 cast for a 2/3, so it has a nice big butt, so it can survive a lot of damage. It has an ability that has a colon, so it means for as much mana as you have in play that you can spend, you can do it as many times as you can. So if you have 4, you can do it once. If you have 8, you can do it twice. It looks at the top card of your library, and if it's a creature card or a planeswalker card, you may reveal the card and put it into your hand, and if you don't put that card in your hand, you put it on the bottom of your library. So this is quasi card draw. It's cool because it puts cards in your hand, but it doesn't count as draw. So there are commanders out there that really affect if you draw a card, you take damage. This gets around that because you're not drawing it, you're putting it into your hand. There is a difference in the wording. This is one of the best creatures in this deck. Another shapeshifter, it's also got Changeling, so it's considered a bear, so Ayula actually affects it. 30 cast for a 3/3. It's only in here because it's a 30 cast 3/3 that counts as a bear. It's one of the cheaper ones for the power and toughness. That's why it's there. The second ability only matters non-commander because you can't have more than 1 copy of any creature unless you're playing clones, which we are not. Striped Bear is just a 40 cast 2/2 that lets you draw a card when it comes into play. Obviously, if Ayula's in play, it's a 30 cast or 40 cast 4/4 that lets you draw a card, but that's semantics. Professor Azumancy, another 40 cast, but at least this one's a 4/3. When it enters the battlefield, you create or make a 1/1 token creature that when that creature dies, you gain a life. Druid's Familiar has Soul Bond. It's a 40 cast 2/2 with Soul Bond. And you've noticed a theme here, I'm sure, that bears everything's in 2s. Their casting cost is usually in 2, but not always. Their power and toughness is usually roughly around 2/2. This goes with that theme as well. Soul Bond means that when it comes into play, you can pair it, basically partner it with another creature you have in play. When you do that, they each get +2/+2. So then it's a 4/4, and the creature that you also paired it with gets +2/+2. It only soul bonds when it comes into play. So if either it or the other creature dies, that soul bond goes away. Unless you can somehow get this back into play in a different way. If it gets blinked or it's returned to your hand and you cast it again, that's the only way you can do it. Exuberant Wolf Bear, it's a 40 cast 4/4. It only matters on his ability with 1 creature, I believe, or 2 creatures in this deck. When it attacks, you can change the power and toughness of a human to its power and toughness, which is 4/4. And it says here base, so it doesn't matter how many counters are on it. So it'll change the human's base power and toughness to 4/4. I believe this is the last shapeshifter. Yeah. All right. So this is also a bear. It's Changeling, but it counts as a bear. It's a 40 cast 3/3. It fits the bear theme though. If you look at what it does, it fits literally as a bear. So you can pay 3, tap it, and exile a creature card from your graveyard. So any of your fallen bears can now turn into 2 +1/+1 counters for another bear. So it's kind of cool. It fits the theme of bears without being one, but it actually ends up being one because it's got Changeling. And the last bear is Owlbear. It's just a 5 to cast 4/4, so good stats with trample, and then when it comes into play, draw a card. It's in here because it lets you draw a card. The only non-bears are going to be a couple. Here's the first one. It fits the theme of bears. It's Goldilocks and the 3 bears. It's a 1 to cast 1/2. Ignore this part for a second. That's the adventure. We'll go over that in a second. When Inflaxen Intruder deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice it to destroy an artifact or enchantment that you wish. Adventures are basically, you can either cast it for 1 as a 1/2, or if you hold it in your hand or draw it later, you can cast it for 7 to create 3 2/2 bear creature tokens. That's where the 3 bears comes in, so it's Goldilocks and 3 bears. And the 3 bears, what happens after that is this card gets exiled or removed from the game, and then later you can cast it for the 1 as a 1/2. So that's how that works. Tuskguard Captain, another human. It's a 30 cast 2/3. It has Outlast, which means that as a sorcery. So obviously it has summoning sickness the first turn, so it would only work on after the turn it's been summoned. You can pay 1 green, tap it, and put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. And it's any creature. Or I'm sorry, my bad, on this creature. So you can put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And then it has the ability that each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has trample. Remember, Ayula's ability is, the first part of it is to put +1/+1 counters on things. So this is here for the static ability, but it's also a human. So you can change its base power and toughness with exuberant, what the hell, Wolf Bear, I think is what it was called, to a 4/4 if you need to. Elf Warrior. So this guy is actually really good in anything but elves. I mean, it's good in elves, but it's really good for everything else in green. 4 to cast for a 2/3. Not caring about that. Whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. So now if this is in play with Ayula, every time you cast a bear, actually, let me rephrase that. Whenever another bear enters the battlefield, because both of them don't care about casting it. Now they have 3 +1/+1 counters on them. Those bears start to get really big. Another human, Paragon of the Eternal Wilds. It's 4 to cast 2/2. It's a static ability of giving all green creatures +1/+1. What that means then is if he leaves play, the +1/+1s go away. All right, and then he has the ability to pay 1 green, tap, and give another creature trample until end of turn. I mean, this guy allows them to keep it if he's out and there's a +1/+1 counter on it. This one gives it to anything it wants to for a turn until end of turn. Not really that relevant, but it could be. So just keep that in mind. And finally, we have Plague Maul Beast. This one was an inclusion for its ability to proliferate. So it's a 5 to cast 4/3. It's a beast, so it doesn't fit in the bear theme, but it fits with the +1/+1 counters. So what you do is you tap it, sacrifice any creature on the board. Usually it's going to be a token. And then you proliferate. And proliferate literally just says anything that has a counter on it, you may put an additional counter of that kind on it. So what that means is if something has a +1/+1 counter, and it doesn't matter how many of them have it, they get an additional one. You get to choose what you want. You can pick and choose. So if there are creatures on your opponent's side that have them on there, you can skip them and not give them the extra counter. Works with Infect too, but we won't get into that right now. That's for another video. Utility time, it's basically, this is going to be defense stuff. This is stuff that gets rid of stuff on your opponent's side. Remember, I told you about Ayula's ability was a fight. This card literally lets anything fight anything on your opponent's side. So anything you control, fight something on your opponent's side for 1. That's the fight cards, and this is the bite card. There are 2 kinds of creature removal in green: fight and bite. This is the fight card. I explained that with Ayula. Bite is the same thing, only the creature on your opponent's side doesn't do the damage back. And yes, that means that the bite cards are definitely better than the fight cards, but there are only a limited amount of them out there, so you have to add some fight cards in if you want to go with that theme. So this one just says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power. It's target creature you don't control, and that's what bite means. So I'm just going to use that term from here on out. Nature's Way is another 2 to cast bite card, and target creature also gets vigilance and trample in case that matters. Also for 2. Clear Shot is a 3 to cast, and this one is a bite card, but it gives the creature you control +1/+1. Outmuscle, same thing. This one is a fight card, and it gives your creature a +1/+1 counter for 4. It also says that if at least 3 green mana was spent to cast a spell, your creature is now indestructible, so now it doesn't even matter what its toughness is. Hunter's Edge, this one is a bite card for 4 that puts a +1/+1 counter on it. Hunt the Weak is a fight card that puts a +1/+1 counter on your creature. We're done with those, so we're going to go into other things. Naturalize destroys an artifact or enchantment. You're definitely going to need some of that. Return to Nature does that as well, but it also has the ability to choose to exile a card from a graveyard. Not normally important unless you're playing something that matters, like a graveyard recursion deck. Crushing Canopy destroys a creature with flying or an enchantment. You get to choose one for the casting cost. That's important because there is not a lot of defense with flying in this deck, so this is kind of important. Same thing with Crushing Vines, only now you can choose a creature that has flying or an artifact. So same card, just one chooses an artifact, one hits an enchantment. Beast Within destroys a permanent, and that includes land, just so you're aware, but its controller creates a 3/3 green beast token in its place. And Broken Wings, so more flying creature destruction, so it can destroy an artifact, enchantment, or a creature with flying. So it takes these 2 cards here and combines them into 1 for the same casting cost. So that's destruction for utility. We're going to go into some creature enhancements. So we're going to go start with Primal Rage. It's an enchantment, stays in play, and while it's in play, all your creatures have trample. Familiar Ground is a cool one, so it's an enchantment that stays in play for 3, and then each creature you control can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. So there are other things like in red that make it so that your creatures can't be blocked by less than 2 creatures. This one means you can't be blocked by more than 1. So now they're reduced to only being able to chump block at that point or put their best creatures up. They cannot gang block. Garruk's Uprising also gives trample. Sorry, it's on here somewhere. I'll read it out. So it's a 3 to cast enchantment. It has Primal Rage's ability. So let's put it this way. When it enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, which you should, you get to draw a card. It gives your creatures trample. So there's the line for Primal Rage. Then whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield, draw a card or enters play under your control. Draw a card. Under your control, that's important. So not from your opponent's side. But everything in here is at least a 2/2, and with Ayula out, it should possibly be a 4/4 unless you choose the fight option. So and it's every time you put one into play. That includes tokens that come into play. Like if Mother Bear, you exile that from your graveyard and you get 2 of them, they come into play as 4/4, you get to draw 2 cards. This card can get nuts. Guy's Anthem is similar to the Paragon that I had earlier. It's a 30 cast enchantment. All your creatures get a static +1/+1 to their power and toughness, and it stays there until either this goes away or that creature dies, whatever, the case may be. You meet in a tavern, it's cool. This one has 2 effects that you want in this deck. It's 4 to cast. You get to choose either or. So you can look at the top 5 cards of your library, and you may reveal any number of creatures from among them and put them into your hand. Not draw, put them in your hand. That gets around draw card, negative effects. And then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Or you can give all your creatures +2/+2 so that you can swarm the board with really big creatures. Monster Step gives them +7/+7 and makes it so that they must be blocked for 5, and then you can cycle it away if you don't want to do that. Enlarge gives them +7/+7 and trample, and also must be blocked. This one can't be cycled away, but this is more like if you want your commander to do, a mass amount of damage, or it's going to help kill somebody off the board. These are surprise combat tricks. Overrun is more of a game ender, so it's 5 to cast. All your creatures get the following: +3/+3 and trample. So it's literally, this is how you end the game: is swarming the board with a lot of big bad bears, and then buffing them up +3/+3 and giving them trample. Scale the Heights, kind of cool. It does a lot of things. So for 3, it gives you a +1/+1 counter for 1 creature you control. You get to gain 2 life. You get to put an additional land from your hand into play, if you would like. And you get to draw a card. And that segues me into my next section, which is the card draw for utility. So green doesn't have a lot, but we have a couple. Lead the Stampede. You see this from, you meet in a tavern. Look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal any number of creatures from among them, and then you can put them in your hand. Again, it's not card draw. It gets around things that say when you draw a card, something else happens. If there are negative effects like the Kusar out, and it puts things into your hand. Return of the Wild Speaker. It's 5 to cast. It's an instant, so you can do it as a combat trick. First part is you draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures, non-human creatures you control, and everything in here is a bear except for a couple. And then you can choose that, or you can give all your creatures +3/+3 until end of turn. So that with Overrun gives them all +6/+6 and trample if you'd like. It just gets nasty. Soul's Majesty, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So if you have something with 4 power, you draw 4 cards off this for 5. Shamanic Revelation, a little different way to draw cards. It's 5 to cast. You draw a card for each creature you control, and you could have a lot on the board, you never know. And then the cool thing is it has Ferocious, which means that it lets you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. So if you have a lot of 4/4s on the board, or a 4 or higher, you're gaining a lot of life. And then finally on the card draw, this will help me segue into the next section, but let's go over this. Garrick, while not technically making bears, he makes beasts. God, I wish they would make a Garrick that made bears. He comes in play with 3 loyalty. This is a Planeswalker. If you need help on how to use Planeswalkers, please message me. I'll have my contact information at the end of the video. For the person who bought this for their son, if you need help with me explaining to your son how to use it, if you don't get the job done yourself, let me know and I'll try. So Uptick creates a 3/3 green creature token. Doesn't get any benefits from Ayula just because it's a beast, not a bear. Its downtick of 3 is to draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So that's where the draw comes in. So that would kill it if you didn't uptick it once at least. Then its ultimate, it's what we call the big downtick, is to create a 6/6 green worm creature token for each land you control. So not too powerful, but very useful in this deck. And that segues me into the token creation and other utility. This is the final section. It's all utility stuff. We're going to start off with Ayula's Influence. So for 3 green, shouldn't matter, it's a mono green deck. You can discard a land card at any time. That colon, it's an instant speed. You can do it anytime you want and as many times as you can pay the cost, which the cost here is to discard a land card. So later game, like that Temple of the False God may end up becoming a 2/2 bear. That may end up becoming a 4/4 bear, actually. So later in the game, when lands don't matter, you can actually start taking that bad land draw and turning them into 2/2 bears that help you out. Grisly Fate. So this one's 5 to cast. It puts 2/2 bears into play. Remember I was telling you about how everything says when it enters play, not when it's cast. So every bear that comes into play in this deck will get benefits from something else. Threshold, I talked about Threshold earlier, so if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, this happens instead. So instead of 2, you put 4 2/2s bear tokens into play, and then you can flash it back. What that means is that if this card is in your graveyard for 7, you can cast it again, and if you have Threshold, you get 4 more fresh green bear tokens. Birthing Bells, so 3 to cast artifact for 4, tap, create a 2/2 colorless shapeshifter token with Changeling. In other words, it makes 2/2 bears that are all creature types, okay? Stuffed Bear was something I put in there just for fun. It's a 2 to cast, obviously it's a bear. With an ability of 2, it's a bear. It becomes a 4/4 green bear artifact creature token until end of turn. I only threw this in there for fun. If you want to remove that and put something else in, that's fine, but I thought it was kind of funny and cute. And the last card is Rapid Vigor. So this one's a combat trick. It's 2 to cast. It's an instant. You can cast it anytime. It regenerates each creature you control, and that's actually quite powerful because people don't expect that because regenerate's not really heavily used. So if you have a lot of gang blocking that you're going to do, somebody attacks into you, you can really fool them by just gang blocking everything they have, killing all their stuff, and then, oh look, regenerate everything. So your side stays in play, their side dies. So, and that's the deck I got for you. Hopefully it's simple enough for the person who will be receiving this. I hope it is. If not, Nathaniel, please go ahead and let me know if there's any problems. Then I will try to help you out as much as I can. So, with that being said, if you need to contact me, if you yourself want to do something like this for your child, or you yourself want to learn how to play Magic and use this deck, here's my contact information. So you can contact me in 3 ways. You can go to the Facebook page. It's Blue Bears Games on Facebook. You can email me at bluebearsgames@gmail.com. Or if you want me to contact you for some reason, you can go ahead and send me a message here. Somebody did that earlier today, actually, and we're talking about selling them an Infect deck. So I said we're going to go over Infect later. Let's see, what else is there? I think that's about it. This deck is not for sale because this has already been sold. This was a personal deck that was requested, but I'm happy to do it because it's Bear Force 1, and I've been meaning to do this anyway, so I'm glad I got to do it. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, I gave you that all the information to contact me. And other than that, please do me the favor. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it out to anybody who's looking to build Bear Force 1 or wants to look at a really nice beginner deck that they can use to either teach somebody or teach somebody how to play the game, or use it as a teaching method to learn how to play the game. And that's my time for the week. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next week for our next build for Nathaniel, which will be Toxtrol on a budget. Should it be done? We did it. Find out next week. Have a good one.